Y News with Angelo Castro III, William Theo, and Darlene Basingan.
Good evening. Police Superintendent Marvin Marcos has been reinstated as the new Criminal Investigation and Detection Group Chief of Region 12. Monokson will tell us why.
Police Superintendent Marvin Marcos and his men are now back to active duty. Marcos has been reinstated as the new chief of the PNP CIDG Region 12, while his men will be deployed to Regions 12 and 7 in Central Visayas. The reinstatement of Marcos Group is in accordance to the order of President Rodrigo Duterte. They were implicated in the killing of Albuera Mayor Rolando Espinosa Sr. and one inmate inside his detention in Baybay Sub-Provincial Jail in Leyte in November 2016. Several lawmakers expressed dismay on the matter. In a statement, Senator Bam Aquino says the order disregards the law and the campaign against violence. For her part, Senator Grace Poe says it will stain the image of the PNP. She adds the police institution does not need the likes of Marcos and his men. Meanwhile, Senator Panfilo Lacson calls for an investigation of the issue. PNP Chief Ronald De La Rosa denies allegations of impunity in the reinstatement of Marcos.
Pinakita man natin na gumana yung justice system natin, di ba? Tumatakbo. That's normal. Kung yung drug pusher o drug lord, may kiniklaim sila na due process, bakit hindi natin pwede ibigay doon sa pulis?
De La Rosa adds the reinstatement of Marcos is because he is now cleared of his administrative case. However, he still has to face the homicide charges filed before the Department of Justice.
Hindi man ako nag-decide noon. Ha? May investigation man na dinaanan yung criminal from murder binaba sa homicide, DOJ ang nag-decide noon.
De La Rosa appealed to Superintendent Marcos to be honest and loyal in his duty. He must also prove that he is indeed innocent of any involvement in the killing of the elder Espinosa. Monokson, UNTV News and Rescue, Camp Crame.
Some senators have questioned President Rodrigo Duterte's order to reinstate Superintendent Marvin Marcos to active duty. Liberal Party President Senator Kiko Pangilinan finds Marcos' reinstatement alarming, considering that both the National Bureau of Investigation and the Senate's findings on the case pointed to murder. Meanwhile, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV says Duterte not only set the murderers free, but he also gave back their badges and service firearms to do more crime. Trillanes adds that perhaps the president worries that the group of Marcos might squeal and reveal his involvement in the Espinosa slay case. Senator J.V. Ejercito, meanwhile, believes that the reinstatement of Marcos is a bad implication, while Senator Panfilo Lacson expresses his disappointment through a curse. Meanwhile, the Commission on Human Rights has expressed dismay over the decision of President Rodrigo Duterte to reinstate Superintendent Marvin Marcos and his men. Maki Libradilla explains why.
Nirerespeto natin yung prerogative ng executive sa mga ganitong usapin. Kaya lang, gayon pa man, dismayado yung komisyon dito sa hakbang na ito dahil yung mensahe niya ay hindi nananatili yung pagtalima sa rule of law.
This has been the reaction of the CHR on the decision of President Rodrigo Duterte to reinstate Superintendent Marvin Marcos. The commission says the move is sending a negative message to the public that there are criminals who can escape the law.
Ito ay nagko-contribute sa culture of impunity. Nagkakaroon rin siyempre ng takot at pag-aalinlangan ng publiko na kapag sila naman ay naging biktima o nalagay sa parehong sitwasyon ay hindi sila makakamit ng hustisya.
Meanwhile, the president has previously criticized the CHR, saying he will protect the police who are accused for doing their job. In this case, he believes Marcos and his men should be reinstated as they are not guilty of killing the mayor of Albuera, Leyte.
Give me a good reason why I should not protect government men security forces and all. Pero mga human rights magsabi, inhuman. I have to protect the humans before I can even think of doing what for the inhuman.
Meanwhile, Malacanang insists that Marcos has been reinstated to a position he deserves and leaves it to the PNP Internal Affairs Service to explain the reason behind the reinstatement of Marcos and his men. Malacanang added that the issue can still be appealed before the National Police Commission. Maki Libradilla, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Bureau of Corrections Chief Benjamin De Los Santos has resigned from his post. In a statement, De Los Santos said the resurgence of drug trade inside the new Bilibid prison has made him irrelevant. His irrevocable resignation is effective immediately and was filed through Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre. De Los Santos says he will refrain from further comments. Secretary Aguirre, meanwhile, has yet to comment on his resignation.
Malacanang urges an investigation on organizations reportedly aiding terrorist groups in the country. Rosalie Cos is back to tell us why.
The Embassy of Turkey in the Philippines, through Turkish Ambassador Esra Kankorer, recently released a statement of alleged presence of Turkish terrorists in the country. The embassy is referring to members of Fethullah Gulen movement identified by the Turkish government as a terrorist organization who allegedly led the failed uprising against Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan last year. According to reports, the said organization is running schools not only in Turkey but also in other countries, including the Philippines. PNP Chief Ronald De La Rosa says it is likely possible that the report is true based on information they are receiving.
Most likely dahil yun nga, lahat ng mga jihadist na gustong pumunta sa Syria at Iraq, wala man sila ibang approach kundi dumaan through Turkey. May mga advisory na naman yung mga ISIS leaders na you can go to Southern Philippines.
Malacanang said the Armed Forces of the Philippines is still verifying the information.
I have to tell you, with all honesty, that we did not have as far as I was concerned. However, there was information available to our monitoring units of similar nature that they have been closely following and still determining if its veracity is true.
Presidential spokesperson Ernesto Abella assures the public that the government will investigate and hold accountable the organizations aiding terrorism and acting as fronts for terror and criminal activities in the country. For now, the Philippine government is working closely with all other nations to combat terrorism that has become a global threat. It has long been mentioned by President Duterte that foreign terrorists have already entered the country through legitimate organization.
They were all around, including the Caucasian-looking guys. But in recent encounters, we have killed a lot of them.
Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue, Malacanang.
In other news, the National Nutrition Council has discovered that a number of infants in evacuation centers in Lanao del Norte are lacking nutrition. Joanne Nano explains why.
The National Nutrition Council Region 10 conducted screening of the nutritional status of evacuees in Lanao del Norte. This after a 9-month-old baby died at an evacuation center in Baloy, Lanao del Sur due to pulmonary disease and malnutrition. The agency discovered in the screening that of 600 infants aged 6 to 9 months, 34 have moderate or severe acute malnutrition.
What we found out is medyo marami tayong acutely malnourished na internally displaced from Marawi.
4 of them are already confined and undergoing treatment at the Gregorio T. Luch Memorial Hospital. Aside from the infants, the DOH Region 10 also monitors the children and pregnant women. It also continues to conduct infant and young child feeding program and provides micronutrient powder to breastfeeding mothers. The government will also begin this week the egg feeding among internally displaced persons at evacuation centers and those at home. It says they continue to provide food packs containing rice, canned corned beef, sardines, coffee for adults, and cooked vegetables.
We coordinate with the local nutrition committees. For example, sa Cagayan de Oro, Nag-coordinate na kami with the City Nutrition Office na bisitahin nyo yung mga evacuation centers and try to find out meron ba tayong ma-identify na malnourished.
NNC is in partnership with organizations like UNICEF, World Food Program, Help for Mindanao, and Modern Nanays of Cagayan de Oro City in providing interventions to malnourished IDPs from Marawi City. Joan Nano, UNTV News and Rescue, Philippines.
And the Department of Health has called on the public to help in providing donations for the community kitchens the government will set up in evacuation centers in Marawi City. Aiko Miguel will tell us why.
In the 52 days of armed conflict in Mindanao, evacuees received food donations in the form of canned goods and noodles. Because of this, the Department of Health or DOH is worried about the health of evacuees if they continuously consume such food. This is why the DOH is urging the public to provide food donations for the community kitchens it will set up at evacuation centers. There, food will be cooked and served for the evacuees. The DSWD has initially called for donations in the form of beans or dried fish.
Nananawagan sa ating mga kababayan, baka gusto nyo kaming tulungan na maglagay tayo ng mga kitchens para maiba naman yung kinakain po nila sapagkat hindi na po biro na parating noodles, sardinas o kaya kung ano man dilata ang kinakain po nila.
The National Nutrition Council or NNC has also deployed nutritionists from their regional offices. There are also barangay nutritional scholars at evacuation centers to ensure that evacuees get proper nutrition. There are now 2 community kitchens in Region 10 set up by a group of modern mothers from Cagayan de Oro and of the Momtrepreneur Incorporated.
They are setting up the community kitchens. Kung meron man tayo mga canned goods, meron man tayo mga noodles doon, at least yung noodles hinahaluan po natin ng gulay.
NNC has reminded mothers at evacuation centers to continue breastfeeding for their babies so they can get proper nutrition.
We really would like to advocate for continuous breastfeeding kasi breast milk is still best for babies. From 0 birth up to 6 months, exclusive breastfeeding, and then continue breastfeeding until 2nd birthday ng bata.
The DOH hopes that the crisis in Mindanao would soon end to avoid evacuees from becoming ill due to limited water supply and lack of nutritious food. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
President Rodrigo Duterte visited today areas damaged by the earthquake in Ormoc, Leyte. His company was supposed to conduct an aerial inspection over Kananga and Ormoc, Leyte, but it was postponed.
Sa atong kekso ng mga taga-Ormoc, niya si Muka, iya kong i-interview, akong masulti nga ni Ame, kay gusto ko tabang kaninyo. O nahay na yung mga programa ng gobyerno, kung saan ng pagpadagan ang tabang. Gobyerno Pilipinas, nadungog man niya kung sa among plano para ninyo. Ang amok yun ang buhat. Let me just tell everybody that I have declared martial law for Mindanao.
The scope of martial law might possibly change based on the position paper the Philippine National Police and Armed Forces of the Philippines will submit to President Rodrigo Duterte. Monokson will tell us why.
The Philippine National Police and Armed Forces of the Philippines might submit tomorrow to President Rodrigo Duterte their position paper on the plan to extend martial law. PNP Chief Ronald De La Rosa says they might recommend to the President the changes in the scope of the military rule.
Baka mabawasan siguro. Mabawasan. Nag-uusap kami, baka mabawasan or buong Mindanao pa rin. Depende na, mag-uusapan.
De La Rosa says he has yet to determine their recommendation on the period of extension. But he assures that the PNP's position paper will contain the reasons for the extension of the military rule. One is the new threat to security the PNP monitored in several provinces in Mindanao. Among the areas being monitored are the Zamboanga Peninsula, Davao, Northern Mindanao, and Soxargen. Authorities believe these areas are the possible next target by terrorists. AFP spokesperson Brigadier General Restituto Padilla, meanwhile, says the president might announce his decision on the matter during his State of the Nation address on July 24.
Posible. Basta bago matapos ang 60 days, kinakailangan magkaroon na po ng desisyon sa ating mga otoridad.
The 60-day martial law period will lapse on July 22, from the time President Duterte announced it on May 23. Mon Hocson, UNTV News and Rescue, Camp Crame.
The Land Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board warns drivers and operators of Colorum Transport Network Vehicle Services who are yet to acquire their certification from the agency. Joan Nano will tell us why.
Traffic law enforcers of the Land Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board is now strictly monitoring the operation of Colorum Transport Network vehicles. This after Uber and Grab revealed to the board that many of their members are still operating even without their provisional authority and certificate of public convenience. For this reason, some drivers are worried that they might be apprehended since they have yet to get their PAs and CPCs.
Malaking kakabahan po bilang isang peer driver at lalo na po yung driver lang, siyempre hindi rin alam ang gagawin kung paano. Napakalaking bagay din sa amin, siyempre ang bumibiyahe at tanong din namin po sa mga kliyente namin na tagi-Grab, talaga namang malaking tulong sa kanila at nangangamba din po sila na nabalitaan nila, paano niyan kuya, patitigil na daw.
LTFRB warns that all apprehended Colorum vehicles will be impounded with a penalty of 200,000 pesos and might face cancellation of accreditation. Apart from this, the board will also recommend to the Land Transportation Office to put the driver's licenses on blacklist if caught illegally operating.
You book your ride, pagpasok mo, hanapan mo sila ng PA or ng CPC. Pag walang PA or CPC, Colorum yon. Pwede nang hulihin yon. That will prevent LTFRB from doing just our regular function, which is enforcement.
LTFRB ordered Uber and Grab to submit their updated lists of drivers and operators and other necessary documents regarding their operations. Meanwhile, LTFRB has created a technical working group tasked to review the renewal of Uber and Grab's accreditation. Currently, the agency is still waiting on the compliance of the two TNCs before they decide on apprehension. Based on the latest record of LTFRB, a total of 14 Uber and 19 Grab drivers were apprehended this year. It was on July 3 when the accreditation of Grab expired. Meanwhile, Uber certification will expire next month. Joan Nano, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Next on Y News. Ilocos Norte Governor Aimee Marcos elevates the case of Ilocos 6 to the Supreme Court and seeks protection against Congressman Rudy Fariñas.
COMELEC's printing of election ballot to push through pending decision from Congress as to whether or not to postpone the village polls.
The National Food Authority ensures enough buffer stock as imported rice is set to arrive this month.
Y News will be right back. Ilocos Norte Governor Aimee Marcos has elevated the case of Ilocos 6 to the Supreme Court. She is also seeking court protection against Representative Rudy Fariñas. Roderick Mendoza explains why.
Ilocos Norte Governor Aimee Marcos is now seeking remedy from the Supreme Court for the detention of the so-called Ilocos 6. For almost 2 months now, the 6 employees of the provincial government are being held in detention at the lower house of Congress after refusing to talk on the 66 million peso fund mess. Marcos says she is minded to appear in the next hearing on July 25, but many advised her she will only be harassed, not to mention the threat that the House Committee will also detain her.
Pinagpipilitan kong pumunta. Subalit yun nga, maraming ang nagsasabi na don't attend. I-boycott dahil hindi patag ang laban sa Kongreso.
In their petition, they asked the Supreme Court to order the release of the Ilocos 6 and to stop the House inquiry. Marcos also sought protection against the alleged threats of Congressman Rudy Fariñas.
Ang hinihingi po natin dito na pigilan po ang hindi makatarungang pag-conduct ng kanilang investigasyon na ngayon ay hindi na lang investigasyon kung hindi inquisition na po. Tinutugis na po ang mga testigo. Tinutugis na po at tinatakot po si Governor Aimee.
Marcos also insists these are all about politics. Fariñas is a former ally who accompanied her during the distribution of buses, multicabs and mini trucks, which he is now questioning. The son and relatives of the lawmaker who are barangay captains in Lawag City also requested for vehicles.
Rudy Cesar G. Fariñas II, anak ni Congressman Fariñas. Pati siya nagre-request ng multicab, ng mini truck. Nung pinamigay yung mga mini truck, sino yung tumataginting na konsorte ko dito? Kundi naman si Congressman Fariñas. Kasama ko sa pamimigay, kasama ko kasi One Ilocos Norte pa kami noon. Ngayon, iba na ang usapin dahil sa matinding politika.
Marcos also said the purchase of over 100 mini trucks and multicabs had passed COA requirements. The cash advance being questioned is part of the payment made to the supplier.
Yung cash advance is a legal mode of payment. Hindi ibig sabihin pag inang cash, ibubulsa. Lahat ng cash advance ay fully liquidated. Walang unliquidated cash advance, walang ghost project.
Fariñas is yet to comment on the matter. Roderick Mendoza, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
Two congressmen are urging President Rodrigo Duterte to focus on programs that will benefit the country's economy as he begins his second year in office. Joyce Balancho will tell us why.
During his first year in office, President Rodrigo Duterte centered his attention to his campaign promise, the war against illegal drugs. Now he is entering his second year. Some congressmen are hoping he will focus on programs to improve the country's economy in order to alleviate poverty.
Ako naniniwala ko sustain natin yung war on drugs, criminality, and corruption. Pero pagtuunan na rin natin ng pansin ng maigi yung ating anti-poverty program and economic ng ekonomiya ng ating bansa.
Natutukan na niya economy kasi siyempre ang aayusin na natin dito yung mga sikmura ng ating mga kababayan. Ngayon, paano aayusin yan? Tinutulungan natin siya.
Congressman Eugene De Vera hopes the Senate will prioritize the passage of the tax reform bill after it has been passed on third and final reading at the House of Representatives. De Vera says tax reform will enable bigger collection of taxes which can be used to fund the anti-poverty programs of the administration. Meanwhile, both congressmen hope that the State of the Nation address of the President on July 24 will be free from threats. The House Sergeant-at-Arms says until now they're still coordinating with the law enforcement agencies for the SONA security. There are 1,500 seats that will be given to visitors and they will only allow those with invitations.
Definitely, ang security measures na gagawin ngayon heightened not only because of the current ISIS, local ISIS-backed na martial law in Mindanao, but because sa marami nang nagawa ni Presidente, especially on the war on drugs and criminality, meron lang maraming nawala sa kanilang pera, tsaka mga tao, magbayad lang sila siguro, baka may mga siraulo mag-volunteer para gumawa ng gulo.
Joyce Balancho, UNTV News and Rescue, House of Representatives.
Several high-ranking officials of the Philippines and Laos strengthened the two countries' ties in the areas of trade, education, and fight against terrorism. Nel Maribuhok tells us why.
The Commission on Higher Education and its counterpart from the People's Republic of Laos signed today a Memorandum of Understanding. The agreement is about the cooperation of the two countries in the area of education. This is just among the agreements discussed by the Lao and Philippine governments for the Joint Commission Bilateral Cooperation. The said commission was formed in 2008. They also discussed the issue on the West Philippine Sea, terrorism, and how to further boost their trading partnership.
I do see a lot of potential between our two countries in terms of expanding our cooperation.
And having these agreements and having the personal relationship will help our overseas workers there and will help also create new markets.
The visit of the Foreign Minister of Laos in the Philippines is part of a series of visits to ASEAN member states as the new Foreign Minister appointed last year. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, Taguig City.
President Rodrigo Duterte has appointed Court of Appeals Presiding Justice Andres Reyes Jr. to the Supreme Court or SC. He replaces Associate Justice Bienvenido Reyes Jr., who retired last July 6. Reyes is the third appointee of President Duterte to the High Court. Prior to his appointment, he served as the top magistrate of CA from 2010. And in other news, the Commission on Elections will push through with the printing of ballots next week, although Congress has no decision yet on whether or not to postpone the barangay and SK elections this year. Aiko Miguel tells us why.
COMELEC assures the public that it is ready for the upcoming elections in October. On July 20, the poll body will begin the printing of ballots.
Definitely kailangan ituloy yan, no? Kasi wala pa naman tayong batas na nagsasabing huwag itutuloy. Pag hindi natin itunuloy yung printing, whether in July or dun sa aming pinaka-deadliest deadline in the middle of August, baka magka-problema tayo in terms of getting ready for the barangay kung sakaling matuloy nga. No?
Although Congress has no decision on it yet, COMELEC said the preparations for the polls should not stop. The agency says it will wait until next month for the final decision of Congress. The Commission is also hoping that Congress will prioritize the proposed postponement on the barangay and SK polls.
Basically, hindi rin talaga makaka-react ang Congress. Even if they wanted to pass a law right now, this very minute, they can't because they're not in session. No? To just slow down the preparations a little. Kaya nga, nababanggit natin na pwede tayong magbagal-bagal hanggang middle of August. No? It will not be a full stoppage of work, certainly.
The COMELEC has 5 to 6 billion pesos fund for the upcoming polls, but the poll body has yet to estimate the amount it will spend until there is no decision yet on the upcoming October elections. The COMELEC has this to say to the public.
Especially sa mga balak tumakbo, especially yung concerned sa mga community nila, huwag kayong mawawalan ng loob, no? Tuloy lang natin yung paghanda natin, tuloy natin yung serbisyo sa bayan.
Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
Meanwhile, the National Food Authority assures that the country has enough buffer stock of rice in case a calamity strikes. Ray Pelayo will tell us why.
The National Food Authority currently has buffer stock enough for 5 days. But the agency said they are ready in the event of calamity or disaster. In 2013, the same year when the onslaught of Typhoon Yolanda happened, NFA was able to supply almost 1 million bags of rice. As of today, the agency has 3 million bags of reserve supply for emergency cases.
Nothing to worry because within 3 weeks period, darating na importation.
NFA held a pre-bidding conference earlier to explain the terms and conditions for the importation of 250,000 metric tons of rice to bidders. A total of 11 bidders from Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore secured their bidding documents. Most of them are private bidders, while Vietnam is from the government.
Pipilitin ng NFA na talagang magkaroon ng successful bidding para hindi naman magkaroon ng problema.
The government-to-private importation scheme became successful in 2014. Similar scheme was applied in 2015 but was diverted to government because the offer of private bidders were higher. Ray Pelayo, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
The Department of Energy says there is a need to upgrade the transmission lines in the island of Negros to address the problem on brownout. Grace Casin tells us why.
The Negros Island region is considered as Philippines' renewable energy capital due to having many solar farms, biomass, and geothermal power plants. There is also oversupply of electricity in the region, as it produces more than 600 megawatts of power from its power plants. The island's power requirement is just 300 megawatts, but it still experiences brownouts due to lack of transmission lines.
We want to resolve that, upgrade all the transmission lines to allow more RE plants to be built here in Negros.
The Department of Energy says the Energy Regulatory Commission has to upgrade the transmission lines so the entire island will have sufficient electricity.
Kapag walang sinag, walang kuryente, babagsak bigla. And therefore, we need to make sure we have the proper technology and infrastructure to absorb on and off these intermittent renewable energy.
The energy capacity of the transmission lines in the region is currently low. This is why it cannot transmit 600 megawatt of electricity. The DOE targets to make Negros Island a 100% renewable energy region. Energy official believes it will also help in the 35% renewable energy program DOE targets to achieve for the entire country by the year 2030. Grace Casin, UNTV News and Rescue, Philippines.
The total worth of damage of the recent magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Leyte is increasing. Based on the ongoing assessment of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC. Leia Ilagan will tell us why.
The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC records about 300 injuries in the aftermath of earthquake that hit Leyte last July 6. The increase came after the agency received information on the number of injured individuals brought to the private clinics in the province. In the latest figure, that number has risen to 906 aftershocks as of this morning.
Napakahalaga po talaga na mayroon tayong paghahanda sa ating pamilya. Patuloy maging kalmado pero alerto para sa kaligtasan ng ating mga pamilya.
The amount of damages caused by earthquake has already reached more than 107 million pesos. The affected infrastructures include 80 school buildings, 5 health facilities, 29 public and government establishments, and 2 commercial buildings. 90 families are still staying at evacuation center and are under government support. These families came from Mount Banao, Provincial Road in Lake Danao, and Barangay Tungonan where landslides occurred.
The local government is initiating an emergency shelter for them. Kasi hindi na natin, yan ang panawagan naman natin sa ating mga kababayan, wag na silang bumalik.
Local government officials are now studying the possibility of building temporary shelters for the earthquake-affected residents. Leia Ilagan, UNTV News and Rescue, Camp Aguinaldo.
You know, Darlene and Will, earlier this morning in Good Morning Kuya, we had a guest reminding us about Metro-wide Shake Drill tomorrow.
Yes.
And of course, there are new tips that they gave. But of course, I think it's 4 p.m. tomorrow, Will?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we should all really participate in it because since there is the big one that basically people are bracing for, I think this would be a good time to be as prepared as you can be.
And of course, it's payday tomorrow, so it makes it interesting how we cope with traffic, right, Darlene?
Yes. And yes, we're calling everyone to please participate tomorrow in the Shake Drill, 4 p.m.
Don't be at the ATMs when the Shake Drill happens.
Okay, yes.
Okay, those are the reasons behind the news, July 13, 2017. I am Angelo Castro III.
Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am William Theo.
And I'm Darlene Basingan because we need to know.
We will always ask why. Thank you for watching.
Why News.